The whole ordeal. Both of our topics today starts with a birthday party. The same way the LA riot...
sounds fun.
It doesn't go well, though. The same way the LA riot started with cops pulling a car over. It's a microscopic event, but the events that unfold are the tipping points for a seismic social moment that is decades in the making. So let's supply a lot of context before we get into it.
I have context too.
Yeah? You can jump in on mine if you want.
No.
You do it. No,
my context is different. I'm going to tell the story from the white perspective.
Poor sailors. I'm going to be repeating stuff that we've already talked about in other episodes. I just have to bring it up again. Los Angeles was once Mexican territory. Not news to anybody.
What?
How did this happen?
Was I sleeping?
Also not news to anyone in LA. LA has always had a significantly large Mexican population. Not news to Where are they?
Not in Porter Ranch.
During the 20s, the city goes through a huge population boom, which I feel like I've said once an episode for the last 10 episodes.
I know.
People were coming from all directions for different reasons. Some of the reasons that Mexicans were heading north around this time was to escape the perils and aftermath of the Mexican Revolution, which lasted from 1910 to 1920. Then, 10 years later, 1931, at the beginning of the Great Depression, President Herbert Hoover was thinking, how can I get more Americans jobs during this pressing time?
How can I get this brassiere onto my body?
I'm not going to lose weight. I'm going to figure a way out. I'm going to put this on and not lose weight. Instead of thinking of a real solution, he just had 1 million Mexicans deported. This is nationwide. It's not just in LA.
This is the repatriation.
Yeah. In Los Angeles.
Sounds nice.
For those who don't know, you could have been born in America, child of an immigrant, and still be deported. It did not matter.
Not in today's world.
That's a thing of the past. In Los Angeles, with our huge Mexican and Mexican-American population, this was a massive exodus. They had raids at La Plaza at scare tactics to get people to try to go back to Mexico on their own. They raided businesses and hangouts to arrest and deport people. There were some major companies like Ford and U.S. Steel and Southern Pacific Railroad that worked along with the U.S. government by telling Mexicans they would be better off with their own people, and they just laid off thousands.
Wow. Not even just laying them off to say,
yeah,
you're better off not with us.
You're better just not.
This document says, go back to your own kind.
I know that you were born in Simi Valley, but you got to go back home. So
ancestral home. Back to Africa.
Mexicans and Mexican Americans were scapegoats in the Great Depression, and getting rid of them was done to satisfy unemployed Americans. I'm glad that is not the situation anymore.
There's so many things in this, like, I can't believe that's how it was like in the 40s.
What's this, 2040? Like I was saying, this was not about illegal immigration. This is about skin color. It didn't matter if you're born here or there. It's just like, we need jobs for white people. Our story takes place in the 40s, right after we entered World War II, so nationalism was being hammered into every aspect of American life. But not American isn't a country made up of several people of different ethnic descents, just white people, mostly white families, American as white. Now, I'm not going to be hypocritical and say, how dare white Americans scapegoat and stereotype Mexicans? That's wrong. All white people do that. I don't like to, I'm not going to do that. Yeah,
I was trying to avoid that too, of like, well, it was the whites versus the Mexicans.
Yeah,
but like,
no, not really.
Not most of them.
Yep. A large percentage. Definitely 60-40. But the fact of the matter is that during the 40s, when everyone was being American rah-rah, their idea of Americans was white families. Again, not news to anybody. Anyways, around that same time, very close, in fact, to the events of the story, the Bracero program is initiated.
Right.
And that was the guest worker program where Mexican men under contract could come live in America to work on short-term, mostly agricultural jobs that Americans didn't want now that there was a vicious war created industrial jobs for them. Oh, and speaking of the war and the reasons that we went into it.
What war?
The
Wait a minute.
one...
Did I sleep through this one again?
The one with Germany, but that could be two.
The future war with Germany?
World War V.
They're going to skip right to X. World War X.
It just sounds sexier. Pearl Harbor was attacked in December of 1941, and almost immediately the Japanese population in Los Angeles was in trouble.
By the way, if you don't like Greg's recap of all this, stay tuned for about 40 minutes from now when I'm going to say the same exact thing.
Mine's just cooler. There's just
a little more street.
Can you drop a beat behind me talking? With Japan working with the Nazis, all Japanese and Japanese Americans were looked at suspiciously. After all, the following year, Lucille Ball's Fillings led the government to a Japanese covert Japanese radio station run by spies.
That's not fillings, not feelings.
Fillings.
Feelings,
like your teeth.
These fillings. Filling feels friendly fire. Friendly fire. Okay, I'm warmed up. Friendly fire. White flight. Friendly
white flight. But of course, not every Japanese and Japanese American in Los Angeles were spies or even aligned with a nation of Japan other than just through ethnicity, which makes the next move pretty brutal. As we've covered before, February of 1942, FDR signs Executive Order 9066, which is this episode, sending 120,000 Japanese Americans to internment camps. Another unconstitutional act
Yeah,
done against
and also
US.
to the Santa Anita current home of horse death.
Yeah, and so begins the Santa Anita horse curse. Took a long time to get going.
They set the date wrong. They got the AM PM mixed up.
All horses are gonna die. You watch in like 70 years. It didn't matter how much you loved America or how hard you worked to make a home in this city and country. You were a spy. You were Japanese, therefore you supported Japan. Your small children who were born here and couldn't point to Japan on a map. They're the enemy too.
Who don't know they're Japanese.
Yeah,
they support
exactly.
Japan.
I just thought I was from San Pedro. Like, what? Therefore, you have no rights. Enjoy the Santa Anita racetrack. Enjoy Mazinar. To all this, of course, Ellie Meekly says harumph. So the tune in the air of Los Angeles at the time was anyone who isn't a white family is a national threat, which sounds a little like the people we were fighting in World War II, but whatever. Scapegoats, racial stereotypes, that was the order of the day in Los Angeles. What Harry Chandler and many other people consider to be the great white spot of America. That's the order of the day.
Yeah.
So now let's...
White paradise or whatever they called it.
Exactly. Great white spot. I just said it right now.
I think they called it the white paradise. No, wait, what did they call it? What did they call it?
So now let's get to zoot suits. I'm sure you're going to talk about it a little bit.
Yeah, but it's good to reiterate. It's good to hear
the same
them.
Episode.
Yeah, it's good to hear over and over again what a zoot suit is. In the intro, in your part of the episode, and in my part of the episode.
Just tell us which one is the best description.
Yeah.
We'll have a poll, and you'll probably say the intro, and we'll be like, you weren't listening. You maybe don't know what it is.
We saw that you only listened to 3 minutes. YouTube told me.
Oh, by the way, yeah, we could tell when you stop listening. Anyways, Mom, to sum it up really simply...
We know when you're not listening.
To sum it up really simply and carelessly, zoot suits were flashy suits. Normal dorks wore gray flannel suits. The young jazz-loving hipsters, they wore zoot suits, which were then, and kind of now...
Let's hear it.
Seen as cartoonish and exaggerated.
Yeah.
If you think that you've never seen one before and you need a visual understanding or reference point, think Cab Calloway. Think the yellow zoot suit Jim Carrey sports in The Mask. Think the 2 out of the 5 better dressed weasels in Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Think the 1944 Tom and Jerry short called Zoot Cat.
Of all those things, that's the one everyone.
My brother Mondo, that was his favorite. If he can do screenshots at the time, he would have done screenshots of that.
He was drawing.
Yeah, he was just
tracing his TV.
Just tracing his TV. Tom and
look at this screenshot I made. Screen sketch. That's another warm up. Screen sketch. Screen sketch. The villain in Incredibles 2. Screen sketch. We saw a baby the other day that looked like Jack. By the way,
did you suddenly like Incredibles 2?
No, I shook him to see if he was going to flames. Yeah.
Get mad. Turn into jelly. Get mad. Huge balloon pants that tighten in the ankle. Boonie. I put boot shiny, so obviously shiny dress shoes, hats with a huge brim, shirts with a huge collar, suspenders normal size, and a long chain for your pants, and it looks really cool when you twirl it.
You can't mess around with suspenders.
No, any alteration to a suspenders and your pants are going to fall down, which is a new look. My favorite suspenders are the ones that hold a barrel over your body.
I'll tolerate all this, but I will not have saggy pants.
You had a long chain. It looked really cool when you twirled it, and you had a big, long drape coat to top it all off. The look could also include, for ladies and gents, a well-groomed but giant pompadour.
Yeah.
Looked pretty cool.
But also, it wasn't just the pompadour. There was a ducktail.
Oh, the ducktail, yeah. What do they call it? Zoot suits grew out of the drape suits that were popular in Harlem dance halls through the mid-30s. The big pants that were tapered to the ankles, that was to prevent jitterbuggers from getting tripped up while they were dancing.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and by the 40s, drape suits had evolved into zoot suits, and they were worn by young people from working-class neighborhoods, predominantly Mexican-Americans and African-Americans. The style was then and is now what I call extreme dapper. Like, I don't want to just look neat.
Exagger-dapper.
Exagger-dapper is a perfect way to put it. I don't want to just look neat. I want to look like the best thing you've ever seen. Like, classy and flashy, and it has associations with jazz and resistance, and even before the events that we're going to talk about later,
and also the reiteration of all this we're going to talk about later. I'll give you another description.
Better worded. The zoot suit was fashion.
I won't say boonie like Greg did. Ugh, idiot. Boot shine.
Boonie was better than boot shiny, which was written on my paper.
Jacket big, boot shiny, arm sweaty, knees weak, palm sweaty.
The zoot suit was fashioned as rebellion. How so? Well, in a couple ways. First, in 1942, as we all know on this podcast, everything was turned into bullets. The Wartime Production Board wanted...
I also have that joke later.
Jesus Christ. It's a joke that we try to make every episode. Oh, the 40s? What was turned into bullets now?
Well, you'll hear.
Tune in later. The Wartime Productions Board wanted to cut back on fabric consumption, so fabric was being rationed, limiting the amount of fabric used for suits.
What would you say it was being turned into?
Munitions.
We need those pointy collars to get through panzers.
We need these boot shinies to take down tanks.
General Patton, we need a boonie strike.
I refuse.
We simply cannot. There was a big sock hop the other night.
The boys needed it. They're turning bullets into suits. That's our new thing, is a parody within a parody.
Shoot suits as they wanted them to be.
Oh,
for the war effort.
The war effort. Shoot suits.
Shoot suits. All right, I'm warmed up.
They would not ration their suits, and they would get their suits through bootleg tailors, which was my 2 favorite word combination now. Bootleg tailors.
I was going to say that.
You can say it, but better. So there's a ration ban, and you're wearing an exaggerant suit. That's how wearing a suit became.
You're wearing rations.
Yeah, you're wearing rations. So therefore, you're not a patriot. This is an unpatriotic act that you're doing.
We decided to start making the suits out of meals ready to eat. We didn't have enough wool, so
we're making suits out of space ice cream now.
Yeah.
Oh, did you guys want that? We turned water in Michigan into suits.
Yeah, that'd be kind of cool. Like those shoes that had like a goldfish in them, but like a suit jacket that was clear but was filled with water. So there's like water.
Oh yeah.
So you're wearing.
Aquasuit?
An aqua suit.
Yeah. Well, Sailor's going to beat them up too. Or would they like them because of the water?
They can't. Try punching that. I dare you to try punching
I dare
water.
you. Oh, no, I'm leaking. Oh, no, you're leaking water all over the place. I'm dying.
My clear blood.
So the rations. That can be one way that fashion was rebellion. But there were...
Fashion
rations. But there was another reason. And what truly made suiters truly rebellious was their pride. The suits are not subtle. They demand attention. This very act went against the stereotype of the Mexican in Los Angeles, really against any non-white ethnic group in Los Angeles. The thought was if you weren't a wealthy or middle-class Anglo, you were to be meek and subservient. Your role in the city is to be a worker. You break your back under the hot sun for nickels, picking the fruits and vegetables that will keep movie stars healthy. That's your job. So the young pachucos who wore suits...
We gotta feed Clark Gable. And Clark Gable is hungry.
He's hungry. If he doesn't find carrots to eat, he's gonna hurt a woman tonight.
Oh, too late. Take that, Clark Gable.
Again, this is your one-stop shop for Clark Gable hatred. So the young pachucos, they wore zoot suits. These guys defied all of that. And here's another thing about it. This was a wholly American subculture. Young Latinos from the neighborhoods who were adopting this from like jazz players from the East Coast, this wasn't a thing they got from their parents. This was American-born Mexicans diving into American culture. So traditional Mexican parents disapproved as much as the stuffy Americans who thought Glenn Miller was edgy. Like both these, like they had no backing. Like they only had each other for support. They didn't have anyone older. Like you're doing the right thing.
There was no Obi-Wan Kenobi leading the Pachucos around town.
There wasn't. It was only young people.
Yeah.
Their parents disapproved. American culture disapproved. This was like a subculture all on their own. So these Zoot Suiters, these Pachucos, they were a youth rebellion, you know, and this has to be said before anything. They were also just young people living in America, having an American life, hanging out with people.
This American life.
They were hanging out with like-minded people, and when you're young and you're like-minded, you get into trouble. There's no excusing any of that, but that's just American life. Teenagers and young macho men, they suck, but that's across the board. Football players in Texas are doing the same stuff. They're also young men getting in trouble.
I'd argue worse.
They're not as well dressed, but like it's just troublemaking. Like it's not, terrorists. They're not Al Qaeda.
Yeah,
that's what I'm trying. They're not the kids today on YouTube. It's like I'm gonna join. I'm gonna join a terrorist organization.
Kids these days and they're Al Qaeda. Will you get off your Al Qaeda already?
What's the new one? I keep forgetting the name of it.
ISIS.
ISIS.
That's the old one at this point.
Oh, what's the new one?
I don't know. CrossFit.
Also an old one.
Yeah,
although I didn't find
Pokemon Go.
How long have you been outside, son? Days, Mom. And I've had a lot of new ideas. Although I didn't find too many specifics, what was worrying a lot of people in the city was a rise in crimes committed by Mexican-American youths. What they were calling, a very adorable term, boy gangs. We gotta stop these boy gangs.
They're NSYNCs, your backstreets.
This was around the time where gangs were starting to form, but it wasn't like the way it is now where there's established parts of it. Like, you have to get a tattoo, you have to get jumped in. These are our borders. These are the people. Bible. Yeah, this is our Bible. It wasn't there yet.
Secret societies at this point.
This was still just like groups hanging out on rec centers who the people on the other side of this hill don't like us and we don't go there. It was the formation of that, but it wasn't quite gang culture outlay yet. I couldn't find too much specifics. The books I was reading, they kind of gave like some headlines and stuff. There was some trouble going around, but it wasn't like this vicious crime wave that the papers made out to be. There was a lot of exaggeration, yeah. So what I'm trying to say is if crimes from this community was on the rise, it wasn't because they were Mexican American like the LA Times was saying. It was because they were angry and they were like just average rowdy people with friends. It's the kind of thing that you grow out of, but they were being demonized in the press for this kind of thing. So all of this is just background noise to an evening in August of 1942 in Maywood near Williams Ranch, which is bordered by Slauson, Atlantic, Eastern, and 26th.
I don't know where is this in the city?
It's near Bell. Maywood, Bell, and Vernon are all kind of neighbors. In the square in the Maywood, Bell area, there used to be a reservoir where people in the neighborhood would hang out, and it was called Sleepy Lagoon, but the locals named after the popular jazz standard of the same name. I used to think that the song was named after the reservoir.
Because I don't even think I knew there was a song, but you were playing a song called Sleepy Lagoon before we started recording. I was like, oh, they put this to music.
Play this to the tragedy footage. Yeah. Sleepy Lagoon is such a beautiful, dreamy name, but a lot of reading. Me too. Yeah, it's a really cool name. But
very Andy Griffith.
It is very Andy Griffith.
Meaning it should be only for white people.
Sleepy Lagoon sounds like a very wet Twin Peaks. Like Twin Peaks, but swampy.
Yeah.
Thank you. I would love to talk this stuff over the theme of Twin Peaks.
Bob's theme, though.
It's just girls screaming.
It's one girl.
Two girls in particular. One girl and the same actress who played her cousin. Sleepy Lagoon is such a beautiful, dreamy name, but a lot of readings describe it as a water reservoir in a gravel pit, which is not a good name for a jazz standard. There's a little grassy area.
Kind of is.
Glenn Miller could do something with it. It had a grassy area of about 60 feet of gradual slope towards a bank, and there's a cement dike 5 feet high that ringed the reservoir, and the water was deep enough to swim in. So Sleepy Lagoon was a swimming hole and a lover's lane type hangout place.
So this was man-made, or?
Yeah, it was man-made.
Okay.
It's not like a beautiful lagoon like I thought it was. It's mostly just like a reservoir that, like, imagine a lagoon here because a galoon. Imagine a lagoon here because we don't live on the good side of town. It was popular with the locals because segregated pools were a thing in 1942, but no one could stop you from hanging in by the reservoir.
There's no segregated lagoons.
Yeah, no, there's no segregated reservoirs. This is just like industrial city stuff, and you could swim in industrial city stuff. We don't care what you guys do, says the city of LA. Sleepy Lagoon isn't there anymore, but I read the approximate location was in Maywood at 5500 Slauson Boulevard. There's another place I read that was 5400 Lindbergh Lane. They're about a mile and a half apart, so Sleepy Lagoon was probably around this general area, which is all industrial now. It was later replaced.
Start digging.
Yeah, start digging.
See how wet it is down there.
Ooh, evidence. It was later replaced by a plastic factory and a government warehouse facility, and nothing remains now of Sleepy Lagoon. Anyways, August 1st, 1942. A party is being held for Eleanor Delgadillo Coronado, who was turning 20 years old.
The party old for a birthday party in a lagoon.
Is this a Patton Oswalt bit?
Patton Oswalt.
Patton Oswalt. The party took place just up.
This is how we treat our idols.
People we love, and Clark Gable.
Our two idols. The two biggest influences in my life. Clark Gable and Patton Oswalt. All right, I'm warmed up now.
Yeah, you got it. I'm going to read this whole paragraph again. August 1st, 1942. A party was being held for Eleanor Delgadillo Coronado, who was turning 20 years old. You want to do your joke again?
What is this, a Patton Oswalt birthday party? What was my joke?
I don't remember. The party took place just up from the road that passed Sleepy Lagoon. In attendance was a young man named Jose Diaz who lived just north of the Delgadillos. Now, he was born in Durango, Mexico in 1919 at the age of 4 in 1923.
How many people have we talked about recently, I feel like, who came from Durango?
I don't know. I know somebody else came up. I can't remember who, though.
Yeah.
I don't know. This podcast empties out. As soon as I'm done researching, it completely empties out. And I remember one tragic fact from each episode.
I normally pride myself in remembering every resident we've talked about from Durango. This one escapes me.
So his family, 1923, they leave Durango, Mexico because of the revolution, the aftermath of the revolution. They entered the U.S. as refugees, and they traveled around California a bit before settling near the city of Bell in 1928 in a small bunkhouse on Williams Ranch, which is like a series of little housing units for people working in a factory nearby. He grew up in a close-knit community of Williams Ranch with many other working-class families, mostly Mexican, some Asian families. So August 1st, 1942, this was his last weekend ever, but it was also his last weekend before he was due for military service. He had just been certified fit for duty, and he planned to serve his country. He wasn't much of a partier, and he wasn't really a drinker, but this was his last weekend with family and friends, and here was a birthday party, so he's going to drink some. Yeah.
That's so horrible of like, fine,
I'll let go this time. So this last weekend, he was letting loose, drinking with a party. So the story gets a little bit confusing. When I was reading it, as I wrote it, it started making more sense, so maybe I don't need to do this, but I wrote it down anyways. I split the three parties into three groups, Group A, Group B, and Group C, just to make it easier if you have problems following like I did when I first started. Eleanor's party, that's Group A. So Eleanor's party is going all right. It's kind of slow, but people start trickling in around 9 o'clock. But around 11 o'clock, a rowdy group of guys who
A.M.?
No, PM.
Oh,
dangerous.
That's late to be in a lagoon.
No, they're troublemakers. 11 p.m., they're troublemakers. Around 11 p.m., a rowdy group of guys who are uninvited start causing trouble when the beer runs dry, and they start shaking.
White or Mexican?
Here's the thing. I read both. Like, I read Anglos by one group of people, and then I read...
It's beautiful that they can come together like that to ruin someone's birthday party.
I read Anglos in one thing, and another thing I read that they were Mexican, or at least Latino, but I can't get a good hold because we don't Group B. Group B. The boys from Downey.
I hate Group
B. Group B is the guys from Downey. So these guys from Downey, they are forcibly removed from the party, and they are not taking it well, and they are promising to come back and fight.
Did they know them, or they just saw a party?
They kind of knew each other. See, here's something I'll get to a little bit later, and I'll reveal it now. All the parties, because they grew up in such a close proximity, they kind of crossed each other's paths a lot because a lot of people worked in a packing plant. They all went to similar high schools. So you crossed paths, but you didn't necessarily hang out with everybody. Everybody had their cliques. So they might have passed each other. There might have been a couple people in Group B that knew people from Group A, but they were wholly uninvited. Around the same time, a group of friends from 38th Street neighborhood, which is about 5 miles west, they pull off Bandini Boulevard and onto Williams Ranch to go to Sleepy Lagoon. It's Henry Lee Rivas and his girlfriend Dora Baca. They're both from 38th Street, and they were already there with their friend Bobby Dallas. This is Group C.
Bobby Dallas?
Bobby Telles. Tallis.
Oh, okay.
This is Group C. So this group is about a quarter.
Well, where's Bobby Dallas?
He's fine.
Where in the world is Bobby Dallas?
I need to know right now where Bobby Dallas is, which is a great name.
It's a pretty good name for a newscaster.
Bobby Dallas Reigns. So Henry and Dora and Bobby, they're already at Sleepy Lagoon, and then like another, I think like 10 people altogether now hanging out at Sleepy Lagoon from 38th Street neighborhood. They're about
so the party's a little away from.
Yeah, it's about a mile, a quarter of a mile, or a mile and a quarter away.
That better be accurate.
We can take steps. Oh, no, sorry. Quarter of a mile. I got it right. The group is about a quarter of a mile away.
Now I don't know what we're talking about.
I don't know where I am in this story. The group Sleepy Lagoon is about a quarter of a mile away from the party. Group A and Group C are detached by that. Okay, so Group C is there by the lake. Mm-hmm. They're all kind of hanging out by their cars still. And at this point, a group of 3 guys in a Model A Ford come driving by, and they start talking.
Better not be a Group D.
They start talking S-word to Group C.
For what group are they?
I believe that they're part of Group B. It's never confirmed, but I'll get into it. I assume, and some other people assume, that this is an offshoot of Group A, this car here with the 3 guys.
What, you mean Group B?
Group B.
You said A.
Oh, sorry. I read Model A.
I'm glad you labeled them all to make this less confusing.
Sorry. So the boys from Downey, Group B. I believe this car, the Model A Ford. I know? Okay, I know.
You're kidding me.
It's a Model A Ford. That's the type of car it is.
God. Wait, so who's Group T?
From what everyone thinks, a part of Group B detaches and they cross Group C at the lake.
In their Model A.
And their Model C. Now, they start exchanging words, and the words aren't good.
Were they B words?
They were B words, yeah. They were S words and B words. Henry Rivas, he starts talking back, and it goes back and forth. And the guys possibly from Group B, they drive off, and, whatever, it doesn't really matter. So Group C, they start spreading out over the lagoon to be kind of separate. Henry wants to be with his girlfriend. These guys want to hang out over here, and they kind of spread out. Around 30 minutes later, Henry and Dora are attacked by about 16 young guys, possibly Group B, or if it's not Group B, then the guys from in that car that drove by. Anyways, those guys came back. About 16 guys beating up on Henry, kind of shoving Dora around. His friends from the neighborhood, they rush to his aid, but all it does is spread 16 guys amongst the 10 people from Group C. So now the entire group of friends is getting beat on, and when they leave, Henry was able to identify some of those guys as they're from Downey. These guys are from Downey, and so possibly the same boys. The Downey boys, AKA possibly
Group B.
Yeah,
drivers of Model A.
Yeah, which is
father
Group
of
B.
Mr. T.
So now the group of friends from Group C, after suffered a tremendous defeat, they went back to Los Amigos Club and they kind of sulked. That's kind of their hangout spot, and they didn't like what happened. They knew they couldn't let something like that go. They were attacked as a group, and they knew that they would have to retaliate with a larger group. So soon enough, about 6 cars full of friends from 38th Street, they were rounded up at Los Amigos Club with the purpose of going back to Sleepy Lagoon to
defend Group C.
They were Group C, and they were going to go back to where they got beat up because they thought they were
growing their
ranks. They were getting more people around and be like, well, they beat us up. There were 16 guys. Let's bring 30 guys back.
So it's Group C plus now.
C plus. Group C is growing. So we're going to go back to beat up the guys from Downey.
7, 8, 9.
Thank you. Yeah.
I get it. I finally get it.
I was listening to an old episode, and you broke a story up just to get that joke in before, and I'm glad that it's happening again.
I'm glad I've grown.
Yeah, you've grown. So they go back to Williams Ranch. It's about 12:30 now. So they return to Sleepy Lagoon, but of course, it's empty. Why would those guys be there? Group B is gone. They could have, at that moment, just called it and went home defeated. But someone said, I hear a party going on.
About a quarter of a mile to a mile and a quarter away.
Maybe that's the boys from Downey. Maybe they're up there partying. Maybe that's they crossed our path.
So now I was thinking Group C were the good guys.
They weren't because they already... Okay, anyways, they got kicked out. What they heard was Group A, the Delgadillo party. So 3 cars from Group C, they head over to Group A. It's not the entire group. It's not all 30 people. It's 3 cars. So it's probably I think 8 to 12 people go over to Group A. At this point, the party is winding down. A lot of people have already left by 1 a.m. and many people, including Jose Diaz, they're on their way out. He was actually about 10 minutes, they said, out of the party when the guys from 38th Street pull up, looking tough and holding sticks, ready to fight. And some girls were dancing on the patio. Some guys were out smoking cigarettes and drinking. And Henry led the group asking where the guys from Downey were. And the people who were at the party had no idea what they were talking about because they weren't relating to the people that got out of the party, the same people that they had no idea what was happening. These 3 cars full of tough guys come up, so they don't know what's going on. So one of the guys at the party, he was shielding his girlfriend, and he looked a lot like one of the guys who attacked them at the reservoir. He wasn't, but he looked a lot like him, and that was good enough. So Henry attacked that guy, and the party and the guys from 38th Street, they all start brawling for several brutal minutes. They're all fighting each other before someone shouted the cops were coming, and they all split, which wasn't true. It was just a way to break up the fight. The people at Eleanor Delgadillo's party, they were beaten and they bloody, but everyone was alive at the end of the fight. And the group from 38th Street, they returned to Los Amigos Club, and they were somber. Like, they didn't like what happened either. They wanted to get back at the guys who beat them up, and they knew that it wasn't it, but it happened anyways. They weren't satisfied. So back at the Delgadillo's house, they began to assess how bad the fight was, because it was spread out farther than just the patio, and that's when they found Jose Diaz, face up, pockets turned out of its pants, beaten and stabbed, struggling to breathe, just north of the small pond near the reservoir, about 3 houses down. What was your question?
How'd this happen?
Nobody really knows. I'll get into speculation near the end of my thing.
How far away was he from?
He was about 3 houses down. He was a little bit closer to the lagoon. So a lot of things, maybe like 3 things could have happened. 2 things are really probable. So the ambulance was called, and his brother rode with him to the hospital, but he died there at the hospital, maybe like an hour or 2 after they were admitted him. He had a cerebral concussion, and he'd been stabbed in his diaphragm and his breastbone. He had a large swelling above his nose, and he was still bleeding inside his left ear. One of his fingers was broken. There was no clear understanding of where Diaz was during the fight, but some people said that they saw him leaving with 2 guests several minutes, up to like 10 minutes before the arrival of the 38th Street gang. There was also speculation that maybe like he passed out because he was drunk, and maybe it was abandoned.
He fell on a knife.
He fell on a knife. Some people were like, oh, maybe he got hit by a car, but that doesn't really make a lot of sense
no,
either.
Cars don't, unless it was a model knife and it had a knife sticking out.
Oh yeah, I have a knife at the bottom of my car. His pockets turned out is the big thing around that. From what I understand, some people who were attacked at the Delgadillo party had suffered small knife wounds too, so it's pretty evident that he was stopping his way out, roughed up. But the details are always going to be a mystery.
I mean, if your pockets are turned out, you'd think someone was looking for something in your pockets.
Exactly. But is that, do you get beat up and then someone as an afterthought is like, oh, let's see if he has anything in the pockets? Or do they?
I mean, it could be,
it could be both.
In video games, once you've, killed an enemy, you loot their body.
In Sonic, when you hit a bad guy, you get the coins. Yeah. It's not why I hit the bad guy, but I did get the coins. This encapsulated night is a real horror story. There's 2 instances of uninvited guests, 2 brutal and unexpected fights, and a murder. It's a real tragedy, but everything that follows goes down in the racist lore of Los Angeles.
Yeah, I'm trying to see because this seems to be a Mexican on Mexican incident.
I remember reading the thing that was like everything that happened after Sleepy Lagoon couldn't be racist because the media was defending Jose Diaz, but like they never found the killer. How hard did they work on that? Like they were just looking for like see what they do even to their own people. It was just like ridiculous. We'll get it.
Yeah, because I don't really know the story that well. So far I don't know what the aftermath of this is.
Yeah, we'll get into all of it. Yeah, because
I'm not racist. I just want that to be clear.
I don't know because one thing should be said about August 1st, and
I'm comparing Mexican people to Sonic the Hedgehog.
Okay, here we go.
Here we go. Say that.
One thing should be said about August 1st and all the people involved. I don't think any of them identified as being Pachuco or even were wearing zoot suits. Yeah. I remember reading the thing that like none of them, I mean, maybe a couple of them, but like it wasn't like across the board a hard Pachuco gang or anything. It wasn't that. I think it was just Mexican American youth involved in a huge deadly mess, and they were synced with this larger intangible social outrage towards the Mexican youth problem that the press was fired up about. And this one moment is a catalyst for all kinds of further wrongdoing, starting of course with the Los Angeles Police Department.
The heroes of this episode.
The LAPD reaction was swift and broad. On August 10th and 11th, LAPD rounded up more than 600 people, virtually all of them Mexican or Mexican American, in what was called the Great Raid. They blockaded the main streets in Mexico.
The Great White Raid.
The Great White Raid. They blockaded the main streets in Mexican American neighborhoods. They stopped all cars entering. The occupants of the cars were removed. They were searched. The cars were searched for weapons and contrabands.
This is kind of like what happens in my story, except not as gentle.
LAPD kind of sounds nice here. Most of the 600 arrests came on charges of suspicion of assault based on almost nothing, suspicion of robbery, and suspicion of auto robbery. Historically, these 600...
Suspicion of you're not white.
Something's wrong. Why are you not at work right now? Historically, these 600 arrests
were... Trying to go to work.
Please, my job starts at 2 a.m. Please let me go. Historically, these 600 arrests were really seen as a guise to just scare up the Mexican American community. Many were taken into custody, and around 400 people were immediately released. They were fingerprinted, and then they were just released.
Gathering DNA.
I can pin this on somebody. Many were taken into custody. Oh, I said that. 175 remained in custody.
Gathering DNA. Oh, I said that.
175 remained in custody on charges of possession of weapons of different kinds. Amongst the 175, 24 young men were detained for the murder of Jose Diaz. These 24 men were all guys from the 38th Street neighborhood, Group C. Under the arrest was Henry Levas and many guys from the 38th Street neighborhood, including Angel Padilla, Joseph Valenzuela, Lupe Levas, Benny Alvarez, Eugene Caprio, and Manuel Reyes.
I love the name Benny. Like Benny.
Benny's a good name.
Well, no, that was Bobby Dallas.
Bobby Dallas.
Benny's a good name. And surprisingly, a lot of Mexican kids had that name, I feel like, in the 40s and 50s.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm Benny Diaz. Here I am. What do you want?
What do you
I'm
want?
Here to join the mafia. I'm Benny Diaz.
Why does he have to join the mafia? Why can't he just be like a police officer?
Because it sounds like an Italian name.
All Italians are mobsters.
I'm not saying all Mexicans are in the mafia. I'm saying all Italians are in the mafia. My defending of I didn't say something racist against Mexicans was me saying I was saying something racist against Italians.
It'll give Italian American Association another reason to hate us.
Add it to the list.
A lot of people who were taken into custody, they said they were verbally and physically abused when they were brought in for initial questioning. Confessions were coerced if they couldn't be easily obtained. Some of the boys said under questioning that they were slapped or punched by LAPD officers, and one suffered a blow so hard it knocked him out of his chair. God. Anyone who was not cooperating with the police was kept incommunicado, even from their lawyers, until the police got the information that they wanted out of them. Some of the men were booked under different names, so lawyers and family members had a harder time finding them, which bought the police more time with the suspects. Some of the women of the 38th Street who were involved in this were also arrested and questioned, but never physically harmed. But there were women who were also arrested for all of this brawls and stuff. The case then went on to a grand jury, which I finally had to look up the difference between a grand jury and a criminal trial because I didn't know the difference. Grand jury helps you determine whether charges should be brought against a suspect, while a trial jury renders a verdict guilty or not guilty of the criminal trial itself. I didn't know the difference before. Now I know.
I'm glad we finally got to the bottom of that.
Did you know the difference?
I don't care about crime.
I just committed. I don't worry about what happens to me afterwards.
I'm not on that part of the game.
So very quickly, the case went to a grand jury as conspiracy to commit murder, and Jose Diaz was a victim of gang violence. Basically, a young group of people were involved in what seemed to be a coordinated attack. Many of the boys in that group were minority youths with police records, and a young man was found dead after a gang departed the area. That's all that they needed. That's just what they were going to get charged on. Mm-hmm. Only 2 jurors spoke out against many of the assumptions that were not being displayed, such as, was this an act of gang violence? What constitutes a gang? Was this murder premeditated, or was it manslaughter? Were they even the ones who committed the act? There's no evidence. The 2 jurors that spoke up were Harry Braverman, who we don't know, and a woman that we spoke about on this podcast before, Charlotta Bass of the California Eagle.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I'm going to be talking about her in
Want to do a Charlotta Bass high five?
Yeah.
All right. The Bastion. The trial did go forward as a criminal trial with the 22 defendants in October of 1942. Also, a big moment in the grand jury proceedings, I kind of skipped over, was when high-ranking members of the LAPD and Sheriff's Department testified before the grand jury regarding youth gangs and violence in Los Angeles from Mexican-American youths, and it's not great. Many of these statements, these high-ranking officials stated their belief that Mexicans were predisposed to violence genetically, that Mexican youth gathered at rec centers and developed into clannish, self-centered groups and refused to associate with other recreational groups. Lieutenant Edward Ayers of the Sheriff's Department said that the main basis for this Mexican youth violence was biological, and that while Americans fought with fists, Mexican Americans resorted to knives and other weapons to fight. All of this hammering...
They hurt more. Why wouldn't you?
All of this hammering home the idea that Mexicans were violent by nature, which is, of course, racist and not true. And for a city looking for a scapegoat, this spelled blood in the streets. That's your side of the story. The parents...
Oh my God, I was talking about something else in the street.
Oh no. I just have the lyrics to Zoot Suit right over and over.
5.5 pages. It's a long song, Greg.
It's the In-The-Gata De Vida of the 80s or the 90s. The parents of the defendants then had to secure legal representation, but that was expensive. Basically, the 2 suspects were split amongst 7 lawyers with money pooled together by the community. The trial in many ways was a catastrophe. The defense was made up of 7 lawyers of differing skill levels and experience. They had a difficult time agreeing on strategies and would on occasion argue in front of the jury.
Talk about a Three Stooges episode.
We gotta cross-examine the witness, you bozo.
Boink. The judge is hitting them on the head with the gavel.
Order.
Hey, I'll take that order. That's the Three Stooges.
In unison. The woman defending Henry Levas, Victor Segovia, and Edward Grandpe was named Anna Zaksek. She was a Hungarian-born
Oh my God, does she work at the Gibbon Conservation Center?
This is her.
Oh my God, I knew it.
She was
I knew she was way too old to be alive.
She was a former silent film film star, and she has a supporting role in Birth of a Nation under the stage name Olga Gray.
Might not want to hire her.
And she would rely on her stage experience as a dramatic actress to make up for her lack of legal skills.
She learned on the set of Birth of a Nation.
She learned on the set of Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. They said that she was pretty good at giving impassioned speeches and stuff, and like.
But they were all. No one could hear what she was saying. She was just mouthing the words. Where's this title card?
When the girls on 38th Street took the stand, they refused to speak out against the boys. They were seen as uncooperative and openly questioned why they were being prosecuted as a gang when they weren't a gang. The prosecution even had a hard time establishing who the leader of the gang was because none of the participants from 38th Street thought of themselves as a gang. So why would they need a leader? We didn't have a leader. We were just friends hanging out.
Yeah.
Despite this, they continually referred to them as a gang, and the prosecution and police centered on one guy as their leader, and that was Henry Leivas.
I hate the justice system.
It's really bad. I am rewatching the Made in America thing about OJ, and I'm like, this whole thing's broken.
It's a new annoyance I've developed of people being like, well, this is how it is.
Yeah.
But no, it's not. It's not how it is. We'll prove it. That's how it is.
And they wonder why I think that I'm Charles Bronson from Death Wish. And they wonder why I walk the streets armed.
Armed to the teeth.
Armed to the teeth.
Armed to the tits.
Tits. I just have stuff strapped to my chest. That's what I'm trying to say.
Like Herbert Hoover.
And while all of this was going on, the young men were being held in LA County Jail. They were being denied haircuts. They were not allowed to get a change of clothes during the first month of their 13-week trial. When defense attorneys objected that the messy-looking 38th Street guys looked like mobsters, the Judge Frick, ruled against the motion. He also ignored defense attorney objections to their courtroom's seating arrangements because instead of sitting them next to their lawyers, the defendants sat in 2 rows of seats facing the jury, which prevented them from consulting their attorneys during the proceedings. Also not helping, the all-white jury were allowed to go home at night.
Except for Charlotta Bass, or was this a different?
This was a different. This was a criminal trial. She's part of the grand jury.
Okay. Well, what's the difference? I wasn't listening.
Did you write down the difference between the two? Also not helping, like I was saying, the all-white jury were allowed to go home and read the news of the trial, as well as stories on juvenile delinquency that focused primarily on Mexican
ask your neighbors what they think.
Yeah, get your neighbor's opinion on what they think. The guy in the Klan mask, ask him what he thinks about all
the
this.
mayor.
So their judgments were being skewed. This was one of the most historically unfair trials in America to date. This case, People versus Zamora, named after Gus Zamora, which is one of the guys. This case was the largest mass trial in California history, and it was a gosh darn catastrophe. Underneath all of this, a defense campaign was being organized, though, led by Josefina Fierro.
Guy Fieri?
Yeah, Josefina Fierro with Carrie McWilliams, LaRue McCormick, and many other labor organizers and activists. The Sleepy Lagoon Defense Committee was created to make an effort to even the playing field in what seemed like a racist and unfair trial.
The Dream Team.
The Dream Team. They helped spread the word around the country to other activists that this trial against Mexican Americans was going forward with no evidence except racist speculation, and they also helped to raise funds to hire a lawyer to replace one of the 7. His name was George Shibley. He was a fiery and energetic attorney who frequently locked horns with the judge, which probably in the long run was not good. Despite all of this, the young men were found guilty. 3 of the defendants were found guilty of first-degree murder, including Henry Leivas. Him and 2 other guys were given life sentences at San Quentin. 9 were found guilty of second-degree murder and were given 5 to life at San Quentin. 5 other defendants were convicted of assault, and 5 were acquitted. Also reprimanded were the women involved with the night at Sleepy Lagoon. The women of 38th Street refused to testify against the gang during the trial. Due to their refusal to cooperate, they were sent to the Ventura School for Girls, a women's reformatory without benefit of trial or jury.
God. Is that a prison, or is that just...
It was like a reform school, which was like a prison.
Yeah. Homework, am I right?
Nah, backpacks, am I right? Dora Baca, Henry's girlfriend, was among the 5 women sent to this reformatory. Also, one of these girls was Lorena Encinas, who had attended Eleanor's party. She was from 38th Street. More on her later. The defendants had a lot going against them.
Are you expecting me to do it?
You wrote about her, right? The defense had a lot going against them during all of this, but the foundation of this unfair trial were the array of Los Angeles newspapers damning the men, calling them goons of Sleepy Lagoon. Speaking of...
That's kind of clever, though.
It's not the worst. Speaking about the wave of violence from Mexican Americans, this kept jurors and the public against the accused. After they were taken to prison, the Sleepy Lagoon Defense Committee, they kept at it. They're trying to seek justice for these men because, yes, they had trespassed. Yes, they assaulted his family, but there was no evidence they had murdered Jose Diaz. It was unjust that they would serve life sentences for something no one had admitted to, and there was no evidence or eyewitnesses accounts of. So committee quickly drew people from the community, from the film industry, and from labor unions. Alice McGrath joined the defense committee committee after the 30th Street men were in prison, and she took on the role of executive secretary of the organization. Every 6 weeks, she paid visits to the men in prison. She reviewed the progress of the committee and overall just tried to raise morale against them, telling them, like, you aren't alone. We see what's happening to you. It's not fair. We're working to help get justice for you guys. 2 years passed at Sequins, and the SLDC, the Sleepy Lagoon Defense Committee, they raised enough money to get a second trial, and the case was moved to the Second District Court of Appeals, which I did not look up what that meant. In October of 1944, Judge Clement Nye overturned the verdicts of the case, citing the insufficient evidence and the denial of the defense's right to counsel and overt bias of Judge Frick in the courtroom. Their sentences were overturned, and Henry Leivas and the other incarcerated men from 38th Street were released. So they're out of prison.
Year, when was this?
1944. So this is so they're released from prison, and their lives are completely changed and stuff, but they're out of prison.
Any money?
I didn't read about that. Probably not, though. It's the 40s. Why would they?
I was thinking about that because this guy, I guess, just got released from prison after 45 years. And they gave him $1.5 million. That's it.
That's your game plan now? That's your payout?
Because I was thinking, like, I would do like 2 years. If I could get $1 million to be falsely in prison for 2 years, I'd do it. But 45 years and all they gave him was $1.5 million.
Yeah, that's a real bummer. All he got was $1 million?
You'll be able to buy a house and then you'll have to go back to work. You shouldn't have to do that if you were falsely in prison for 45 years.
Just move to Detroit. Houses are cheap there because no one wants to be there.
Yeah, well, then you're
living
back in prison.
It's a different kind of prison. We love Detroit. We love Michigan.
We want to expand our market.
All right, you ready for this?
Yeah.
Then comes the deathbed confession from Lorena Encinas.
Oh, no.
See, while everyone was concentrating on Henry Leivas, there was a background character who was not even part of the 22 defendants that should have been looked at and wasn't, and that was her brother, Luis Encinas. So Lorena Encinas and many other people from 38th Street neighborhood ended up at the Delgadillo house that night, invited, but her brother, Luis, wasn't. He was one of the people who showed up with the Group B, friends that crashed the party. They were the ones ordered to leave the party after being rowdy, and according to Lorena, on her deathbed, she said that he and his friends encountered a boy who just left the party and jumped him. Lorena was questioned but refused to say anything and was taken into custody. Her silence on the matter during the trial led to her being sent to the reform school along with other women in the trial who refused to cooperate, but she figured a reform sentence for her would be better than a life sentence for her brother, the possible killer, instead of justice being served. So what she's...
Did she understand that other people were also going to go to jail?
Probably not. I mean, like, she saw everything that happened and still didn't say anything because that's her brother. But basically, she's saying my brother was the one with two other guys. There's a lot of problems with this, though. Mostly because Jose was seen at the party close to 12:30 and was seen leaving about 15 minutes before 38th Street guys pulled up, and he was in the company of two men. Some people say that maybe Encinas hung around, him and two guys hung around and returned out of anger of being kicked out, and they found him on the path up and said, well, let's jump this guy. But like, just thinking about motives, remember his pockets were outturned. This was mostly a mugging because a lot of men in the area where they worked at the Sunny Sally packing plant, and the party was the day after payday, so maybe someone knew that he had been paid, so maybe it's somebody that had worked at the plant.
Or they wanted it to look like a mugging.
Exactly. But like, I just can't...
But why?
It's a mystery to this day. Like, maybe he was drunk and fought back and was killed because he was drunk. Maybe the mugging was an afterthought.
Maybe he had turned his pockets out.
Yeah, maybe
he was looking for a mint.
Exactly. Maybe his pockets were turned out and he was looking for something and he got jumped on the way. But Lorena was saying on her deathbed that her brother was the one that killed him. What actually happened was always going to remain a mystery. It's never going to be solved, and that's the murder at Sleepy Lagoon.
Okay. But who did it?
I know that's a mystery. It's never going to be solved, but like, who did it?
You can tell me, though. Yeah. I mean, we'll turn the microphones off.
I know.
Let's ask the guy from Pacific Dining Car who did it.
James Alroy's The Big Nowhere, he supposes that Dudley Smith was the one that did it, and it was done to stir up...
Which one was Dudley Smith again?
Do you see LA Confidential?
Yeah.
It's the guy from Babe, the actor who plays Babe, who's like the main police
Farmer
chief.
Hoggett?
Farmer Hoggett.
You think this goes up to all the way to the top?
To Farmer Hoggett. But anyways, they're saying that he did that to stir up all the trouble that was created afterwards.